prepare. Listen to the people, listen to humanity, listen to the parrot, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot. Listen to the people, listen to humanity, listen to the parrot, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV. Listen to the people, listen to humanity, listen to the parrot, Parrot TV, 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 Parrot TV.
The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. Hi, welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Welcome to our 211th episode. We've reached past the 200th episode milestone, so thanks for being with us, all you guys out there. If you're watching right now, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and feel free during the entire broadcast here to give us some comments or ask questions yourself for the guest. Today's guest is Sarra Culleno, who is a British BAME poet, mother, English teacher, and author of Bonds, a short story collection published by CAAB. Sarra is widely published. She has written fiction and poetry for publication, performance, print, audio dramas, podcasts, and radio. Sarra was longlisted for the Cinnamon Press Pamphlet Prize for Nightingale and Sparrow's Full Collections 2020 and nominated for Best of the Net 2020 by Amba Poet. Sarra is a frequent contributor to Fevers of the Mind and to Alternative Stories and Fake Realities. She co-hosts Write Out Loud at Waterside Arts and performs as both guest and featured poet at numerous literary festivals. Thanks for joining us today, Sarra. How are you doing today?
Hi, Dustin. Thank you for having me on. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a new book, a short story collection, Bonds. So tell us, what are some of your stories? What are you exploring there? Are there any central motifs or any kind of theme you're wishing to, some sort of idea you want the readers to gather from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a difficult book to market because it's not one single genre. So, usually writers are kind of encouraged to stick to one genre. And I really wrote these because I felt like I wanted to write them. I wasn't thinking about selling anything. So really the central theme that ties them all together is in the title. It's bonds, particularly parent-child bonds, but they're kind of hidden. It's not, one's a sci-fi about a robot who has these kind of drivers to care and nurture. So it might not be obvious in some ways because that's an unusual genre. It doesn't usually explore that kind of a theme. And I did read somewhere a long time ago, writers are always telling the same story in lots of different ways. One writer has got one thing that they want to say and they just find tons and tons of ways of retelling that same idea. And I really think I did find that, and that's what's coming through in all the stories that are in the collection.
So were you exploring, different styles and techniques to sort of escape that uniformity of thought that you were describing? Is it some kind of, desire to push the envelope a little bit and maybe find some other aspect of yourself that you're looking for in the work?
I think with the novella, it's the longest story in the collection, Machina Ex Deus. With that, I love sci-fi. I particularly love robot sci-fi. And I always felt like the representations of motherhood and infancy and that dyad are always missing from those. And it's kind of, it's the argument that you have with Afrofuturism if people of color don't see themselves in sci-fi is all about, asking what will we be like in the future? What will we be like?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't see yourself represented, then where do you go? Sci-fi comes first, and then the engineering and the technology and the actual science follows. The idea comes first.
Mm-hmm.
And in a few stories I'd read before, particular Aldous Huxley with Brave New World, that chapter 1 with the hatcheries. I read that when I was very young, and it had a really deep impact on me. And then having children that I had to send to nursery far too early and being separated from them before they're developmentally ready, and all of through adulthood, I think all those things kind of merged together for me to write this sci-fi that was really important to me. I think that was the only one that was contrived, that I didn't see my story and the stories of mothers and very small children being repped, if you like, in sci-fi. And it's a genre I love, and I wanted to fill that gap for me. Write the story you want to read. Isn't that the saying?
Absolutely, and write what you know. And there's a whole host of sayings that you could use in that, for that particular case. So, as both a poetry and fiction writer, do you find that prose and poetry are different? And what do you think of that sort of division that's often presented? People ask, what is the difference between poetry and prose? And a lot of people can't really answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so subjective, isn't it? Especially like with modern poetry, without the form and the meter and the line lengths and all of that, it's all open to experimentation. I guess the form of it on the page is the big difference for me. When I write poetry, I love to play not just with meter and counting syllables and playing with sounds. I like to experiment with how it looks on the page. That's representative of what I'm trying to get across as well. The shape of it and how it, not that it's all concrete poetry, far from it, but the shape of it is representative as well. So, a jarring line break is supposed to convey something disturbing and broken, for example. That, I think that's the big difference with prose. Although it creeps in, it's very hard to write a story without these kind of poetic tricks in there, and it makes a story more leveled, I guess. Lots of different levels to it when you enjoy the language as well.
You're right, I think so. And the poetry and prose both have in common, the ability to craft language and use it conceptually and to present, thoughts and events and what have you that you want to present. Of your short stories, and especially in Bonds, what particular work do you think captivates you the most?
You mean the influences?
Well, just of your own work, which one of the pieces you've written captivate you the most?
I suppose while I was writing it, I really got into the Legend of Bagley Brook. So it was lockdown when I wrote it, and we were going on lots of nature walks, like lots of people, discovering these amazing natural spaces that we had just ignored, up until lockdown. And at the same time, my kids had really got into myths and legends, and we'd been to Cornwall the year before, and every street corner in Cornwall has got a giant or something, some kind of ancient folklore attached to the landscape. And I looked up this brook that we kept visiting, and there was nothing. Like, I really couldn't find a single story. And I thought, well, I have to fill this gap. So I looked up kind of, water hag mythology, sort of British water hags, and one that came up again and again for the northwest of England, where we are, was Ginny Greenteeth, but she's got lots of names all around the country, Peg Powler, but it's a cautionary character who kind of snatches children from the sides of riverbanks and things, and it's to frighten children into not playing dangerously near the water. And, you know, I worked it into our local landscape, and I used dialect from Middle English, so 500-year-old Cheshire dialect from the area. I found this dictionary and just got really into just the language of it. And at the time I was teaching Macbeth, I think, online to my classes. So all the kind of witchcraft trials and the cunning women, that ended up kind of creeping in as well. So I think that was the one that I kind of couldn't help myself, and it's a bit indulgent, you know. The language is pretty quirky, to say the least. The editor who looked over my work said, "Well, I really don't know how to edit this because it's all Inkhorn terms, it's all Middle English." So that was really fun to write. And again, I didn't think it would appear anywhere. You know, I was just writing it for my own amusement. So I'm absolutely thrilled. It's out. It's going to be out there in the world pretty soon.
Excellent. Yeah, congratulations on that. So as a teacher, do you find that, you know, teaching your students, do they ever sort of teach you something back that relates to your writing?
Oh yeah, all the time. And what's crazy is as a teacher, you get older and older, and you have a different perspective on them every year, but they stay the same age. So especially year 7, I don't know what that would translate to in the US, but they're 11. And as my own children kind of creep closer and closer to that age, they look smaller and smaller to me every year. And I'm kind of more and more maternal about them every year because they seem younger and younger. So what have they taught me about writing? Well, again, through lockdown, we were doing kind of remote learning, you know, a lot through the screens. And I wouldn't normally have had the time or the freedom to have encouraged them to get published or join writing competitions. So, you know, I was devising courses for them that I could never have done in the classroom. And they were actually sending off their own work to publishers. A few of them got published themselves through lockdown. So
that's excellent.
Yeah. So at the same time, I only really started writing things to submit because somebody I really respected encouraged me to do it. And somebody who I thought, well, they really know their stuff. And if they think there's some value in what I've written, it gave me the impetus to actually send it off. And seeing that happen with, you know, age 11, 12, 13, and having the opportunity, you know, it was kind of, you know, lockdown is so difficult in so many ways, but this was kind of a silver lining, really. So that it compounded that lesson for me, that all it takes is a little bit of encouragement and, you know, a nod of, you can do this, go ahead and send it in, from somebody who's bigger than you, who's been doing it longer than you, is enough to, you know, get a reward back in so many ways from your own writing. So I think that's the biggest lesson they taught me, particularly this year. We were kind of on the same route at the same time.
Did you work with editors with your work, or was it sort of a process that you did on your own?
Well, I wrote the stories on my own. And I guess it wasn't really editing, it was more proofreading from the publishers. The publisher that I'm with is Cab Publishing, and they're, you know, small, independent, small press publisher. So really it was like proofreading, the kind of editing that they offered, and, you know, invaluable. So many mistakes, you know, obviously that they point out. I'm so grateful for the work they've done on it. But the kind of editing in terms of structuring things and moving things around, that was really kind of my beta readers. So friends, other teachers, Chris Gregory, who runs Alternative Stories, Fake Realities podcast. He's a producer on that. He just does amazing stuff, award-winning stuff. So people like that looked it over and said, maybe this would work better later on. And if you have this established in your kind of first act, if you like, it'll work better in Act 3 when you do this kind of reveal. it was really useful to have people like that who sort of understand narrative and plot arcs and that kind of thing.
So do you prefer to write poetry or prose? I mean, do you think one or the other conveys your message better?
I love writing both. What it comes down to is time. So a poem is short and it's compact and it can exist completely on its own. And writing prose, obviously a lot more planning and time involved in that. So during the first lockdown is when I wrote most of these stories, and I wrote the novella when I had COVID. I had long COVID, and it was part of my recovery. It took me about 10 weeks to kind of recover from COVID. And with the brain fog and very difficult to get words out, I kind of lost my vocabulary. I was slurring. I couldn't speak properly. So a lot of people recommend things like doing Sudokus and crosswords, and for me it was writing. I got my vocabulary back from the Shift F7 button and Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it helped my mind get better from this terrible fog that descended from having COVID. So so that's what it was for me. That's both of those types of writing help that, but a prose is longer and takes much more planning, and I don't know if I'll ever have that kind of time again like I had in lockdown 1 and when I was off work with COVID the first time. I don't know if I'll ever have that much time again. So I think mostly it'll be poetry from now on for me.
Interesting. So I look forward to some of the poetry coming out, and hope our viewers check it out as well. So when you're writing and you went through this process of recovering from COVID, was it like relearning everything, or was it more like reinforcing what you knew? And I mean, how did that feel? To try to overcome that lapse, those memory lapses and brain fog?
Well, it's kind of like waking up and you realize your surroundings again. You're like, okay, right, I know where I am now. It was kind of like that. That's the best analogy I can think of. I really even found it difficult to read at first. It was actually this time last year that I caught it, and I had this fantastic book called The Loney. It's the best horror book I've ever read. I couldn't read it. I was reading like one sentence and getting to the end of the paragraph and just forgetting how the paragraph had started. Like I couldn't focus on anything. So I started with just reading, and a book like that, it's a really high level of interest. So it was quite easy, even with the brain fog, it was easy to kind of get through it. So I started with that. And then I was watching The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and I was just jotting down anything interesting that they were saying. So a lot of the things that they say on that documentary come out in my novella later on, a lot of the ideas. And it was just like a spark, when you probably know yourself, when you start writing something and you get the bit between your teeth, it kind of, even if it's difficult, you've just got a drive to do it. You just want to do it. You can't do anything else. It's like wanting to finish a book. You don't want to put it down. So it was like a spark, and then actually looking up words and plotting out a story arc and deciding on personality types for characters and things like that. It was like waking up. It was like that stuff is all there, and I kind of was asleep and it was forgotten about, and it was just all waking up one by one as I started writing.
Wow, that's fascinating. Do you think that writing itself has some sort of way of relating to memory and reinforcing the process of memory?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but you know,
Right.
the idea of pathways, you know, if you don't use them, they do go to sleep, and the more you use them, the more they fire off. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's like anything that you practice. You know, we're constantly told this in teacher training about how repeating something is the way for it to just become reflex, and then you don't have to think about it. And then once it's reflex, you can go on to the higher order stuff. You know,
Right.
it's basic education strategy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so so it was kind of relearning that recall that I had before, but in doing that, in that practice came out on the page. And I guess if I hadn't have had COVID, I wouldn't have felt the need to practice it and kind of be getting those rewards, those dopamine releases from reward. It wouldn't have happened. So, you know, relearning it by writing, I guess, is the reason why I have a novella at all.
Wow. We're going to take a brief break. Check out this work by Jill Sharon Kimmelman. Thanks you for watching the program.
Contemplation of a phoenix in flight for Annette. On the wings of doves you fly. In freedom you have found an extraordinary voice. Celebration of your journey's path is freedom defined. In the stillness of tranquility, your words returned. A whisper within your heart, at first you denied. Incessant, gentle nudges you avoided, until you could no more deny those words, in those impassioned pleas, then you could stop your heart from beating, your lungs from breathing, your pen from bleeding. Every brilliant word crafted sonnets and stanzas, awaited, welcomed, inspiration accepted. Your declaration, drafted in tears while haunted by fears, now an affirmation of strangers everywhere. Celebrate freedom earned, blessings of lessons learned. Like the lotus, your greatest gifts grew greater in the ooze of mud. You are a magnificent phoenix with plumes of every hue, the grandest of dreams now yours to pursue. A vibrant blossom ablaze with fiery gems, your magical words. A beautiful phoenix soaring, tall, strong, proud, no doubt at all. Most magnificent of birds, most beautiful of all.
Hi, welcome back to the Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, and that was a wonderful presentation with music from Sanka Sen and poetry by Jill Sharon Kimmelman. We had her on the show recently, so take a look at her interview not too long ago, and we had another one with her back in July, if you want to take a look at that episode. So thank you both for participating in that. So we're back with Sarra Culleno. Would you like to read us maybe a poem or maybe a fragment of a story?
Yeah, sure. I've got one from Pop Shop magazine. So which issue is this? It's an older issue, summer this year, issue 32, Pop Shop. And this is it was the theme of this issue was growth, and I write so much about children. So this one's called House Sparrow. I saw a strange thing in March before winter's blanket lifted. Still to plume into wieldy monochromes, a house sparrow, a fledgling fluff, latte foams, and breathy grey, too early ushered from the nest to the garden, showed no joy in the erratic company of his peers' combative play, no pleasure in the assaulting smack of snowballs to his skull. I imagine, back at the nest, there's no relief in the scalding bath, which wizened, toughened hides insist is fine. As siblings guzzle the nasal lava of fizzy pop he watches on, no sugar rush, no appetite to force down the greens on his plate. Too often rushed with no time to be, too early ushered from the nest, to protest the injustice, not enough notes yet.
That's very lovely. I love the play of language and the some of the themes of, like, growth and playing and being a child. It's very nice. It's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
So that was inspired by your own, watching your own children grow, or was that sort of imaginary? Or
it's a couple. I really feel that in the UK, children start formal education far too early. In many other European countries, they only start at age 7. Even those children that are just going to daycare, kindergarten, are separated for too long from their mothers, usually primary caregivers, and they're not developmentally ready for any of it. So this was really, and I did see a bird out in the garden, and it was far too early for this bird to be out, and it was very young, and it was an obvious metaphor that pushing them too early just means poor outcomes for them. It doesn't mean that they do well because you're giving them a head start. It means they're not ready for what you're expecting them to do. And it's just a sensory overload and not enough comfort and nurture, which is what they need more of when they're that small.
Right. Would you like to read an excerpt from one of your short stories?
Yes, let me see. I might read the story that's the poem that starts the short story off. That might be good because then it's like a hybrid of poetry and and the short story. It's a broken sonnet which starts off my novella, the sci-fi novella.
Okay.
And I guess it's broken because it's about something that's broken. There's a temple that still stands in Iran now, and it's a temple that's dedicated to Anahita, the original feminine deity. She was a water deity, and in its day it was palatial, revered, and it echoes the status of women, and the important work they do was respected and held upon a pedestal. And now it's in ruins. It's thousands and thousands of years old. Predates any kind of Greek or European ruins that we have in Europe. And again, I thought it served as a really interesting metaphor for kind of how our modern society is treating femininity, particularly in terms of fertility and motherhood. So that's what it's about. So it's called Arbzor's Temple Sonnet. It's Zoroastrian, Arbzor, offering to the waters. 450 BC in old Kangavar, of Achaemenid start, Sassanid end. Persepolis' traditions recalled are stone platforms from which 2 stairways ascend. Gilded, renamed Venus, River Ishtar, Mary, Aphrodite, Anaitis. Venerated divinity, water, Hellenistic in characteristics. Life and herd increasing folds forced open, her milks flow to newborns suppressed for coins. One breast shielded, the other manhandled, toppled, gypsum limestone turrets broken, skies beating blues, grasses slice, bone bleach stone, air, a stately gold place, she resided.
Very beautiful. And I like what you're saying, your essential point, being the sort of push away from, I guess you could say call it a matriarchy or a maternal power into what we have now and what, is dominating the Western world is sort of this, machismo or male dominance situation and all the various problems that ensue from that, including some of even the Me Too movement, which is trying to restore the balance of women back into society as people with power and ability to stand their ground, and to contribute that power of femininity to the world and to the society at large. And I like that you use that, that historical precedent to sort of solidify that point. That was very nice.
Well, it's not so much about the matriarchy or patriarchy.
Right.
I suppose it is. In that time, going back to the first poem I read, that secure attachment between an infant and its mother was really respected. This was your most important life's work.
Right.
And now, I think the US is even worse for maternity leave than the UK. That attachment is not respected.
Absolutely.
And I think so many of our problems stem from these insecure attachments. It ripples right all through the classes and the echelons. If that was fixed with policy, if 2 years could be devoted by mothers to their children with no repercussions for them financially or otherwise, then so many of our problems would be fixed, 20 years down the line. The problem is that when they have election campaigns, they don't need to see those results 20 years away or 30 years away. They need them in the next 5 years. So that's what's measurable. So these, children are very expensive in their first 5 years, if you invest in them properly. So it's not worth any government's while to push that. It's far better to kind of steal the tax that's earned through mothers' labours away from the children that own it, and that's where they can see their metrics on paper. That's where their statistics will sell to the electorate. So that's I guess that's the message that's coming through in all of my work, my poems and my stories as well.
Right. And I actually agree with you. And I've thought myself that, some of the various perversions we see publicly, especially now, there's a lot of at least in the United States, some of the things that are public that are, especially in regards to sexuality and stuff, it's like unheard of. And I think a lot of that stems back to, broken families and families that were not able to nurture their youth. And, and it creates people that are essentially broken and have to, show off, I guess, be public, and be, showy about themselves because they didn't get the attention they needed or they didn't get the care they needed. And so that translates all the way into, it can be many years before anybody could possibly actually heal from such a thing. And society is not giving them what is necessary for them, these stunted individuals, giving them what they need even in their adulthood to overcome those issues. And I think right at the very root of the thing is what you're saying is the family and being able to, for mothers to sit and have their attachment to their infants and help nurture them and make them, grow and be responsible and take, where they're actually whole individuals, where they can cope with reality in the world. And, we're seeing a lot of just general societal breakdown because people were not equipped properly to deal with, I guess you could call it the onslaught of, things outside of them because they're not complete. They're broken, I guess their ego is a little stunted and they don't have the love themselves that they need within themselves to overcome those things. Yeah. It's very true.
Yeah, I mean, so if attachments are not secure early on, there's a void. So what rushes in to fill that void? And it was very clear to me when I was watching The Social Dilemma that you know, this void is being filled more and more with likes and shares, and maybe not for my generation or yours even, but certainly for the children I teach. And you know, I agreed with a lot of the people that appeared on that documentary. I haven't let my children have devices until they get to high school age, at least, because it's so frightening that's where they're getting all their affirmation from.
You can rewire the brain in a lot of ways to be seeking stimulation constantly, and like it's almost like your brain's wired to go bleep 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 blank, you know, and just kind of seek the next external light, you know, in a way, you know, and the likes and shares. I mean, there was that one film that got a lot of controversy, Cuties. It was on Netflix, and that was criticizing the social media's pressure and the way the family dynamic is challenged by social media. That was another example of that. And it was, you know, it was heavily criticized for its portrayal of that. But that, I think, was the essential point the filmmaker was making. Yeah.
And I think without these attachments as well, there's no empathy. People can't grow up to be empathetic. I mean, even Dickens, you know, the Christmas Carol. I'm only saying this because I'm teaching it at the moment. But you know, he's packed off to boarding school age 4, and it's only until he faces this broken attachment and this neglect, this emotional neglect, that he starts to be able to realize he's a sociopath. Up until that point, when he hasn't faced yet, he's just repressed that he was packed off to boarding school age 4. He can't empathize. You know, he inflicts poverty on himself when he doesn't need to. So why should anybody else be lifted out of poverty if he doesn't feel like anybody should, including himself? He's always lived like that since he was 4. Nobody cared. So, you know, I don't think it's a modern theme to be explored. I mean, so much sci-fi can do it now because of social media. We can explore it really well. But, you know, even in Victorian times, Dickens was conveying that message in really popular, you know, it was pop fiction then, wasn't it? So, you know,
I think all these tendencies, I think they translate, even if you're not an outright sociopath, you know, some of those tendencies of narcissism and, you know, real conceited self-interest, like to the point of shallowness. I mean, that translates into culture, and you see it and just common people can be that way at times. And they, you know, it's like, you know, people can actually, even if they're not outright sociopathic, they still have the capacity for empathy. They may still be stunted and, you know, be constantly driven for you know, all this attention and, you know, be very shallow people. And I think it does stem to the lack of having yourself given the full care as a child to be able to develop enough that you can actually, ironically, can leave the family as a full individual prepared for the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I tried to explore in my novella. It was the idea. Well, it's dystopic, you know. It's sci-fi. It'd have to be a bit dystopic, but it's the idea of what happens when an entire society is suffering these insecure attachments. What happens if the whole of society is operating with that deficit?
Right.
You know, what kind of policies are in place that nobody seems to think are abhorrent anymore? What are the repercussions for individuals? What hope is there? So that it's certainly.
You know, and it makes me think that if the state doesn't help nurture the family at its root in the youth, they are going to repay for that when that child gets older, starts committing crimes, you know, basically ends up, you know, doing all sorts of things, ends up in hospitals, and the state has to take care of them there, you know. So it's one way or the other. You might as well go with it at the very beginning. And like you said, it's like short term, like they can present themselves. Oh, we've got a plan for the next 3 years while I'm in office. And then they get out and it's like, who cares, you know? And they can say, oh, look, you know, we saved this, this, and this, and did this. You know, politicians are king of sociopaths. They're king of manipulation. Yeah. Yeah. It's very sad.
It's a very kind of capitalist driven, you know, the idea that children are belongings like a car, or, you know, they're not citizens. They're not our most vulnerable citizens. So many people see kind of the investment into infants as some kind of like holiday bonus or something, which people don't deserve. But they're seeing it in terms of what the adult is getting out of it. They're not seeing it as investment in a citizen right at the beginning when they need that funding. Societally, you know, children are expensive. They are, and
even to the parents too.
yeah. But as a society, if you want to if you want a skilled society full of functioning adults in 30 years, then you need that infrastructure. It's like paying for roads. You need to maintain it. It needs maintenance, and it needs policy. And it needs funding like any infrastructure. So if it's not invested on at that critical time, you've lost your window to fix the problems that are going to occur in 30 years. So I completely agree.
Yes. How do you think literary works can explore these kinds of themes, these social dilemmas, and do you think it could actually be effective? And what can readers get out of reading a work like that?
So another one that I'm teaching at the moment, you know, British English teachers they're probably fed up with this play, but it's An Inspector Calls by Priestley. And it was written, you know, kind of post-war. And, you know, writers like him, it's thanks to them that Britain still has some semblance of an NHS, although it's quickly being eroded before our eyes. But, you know, the reason why it ever existed was because of these writers. And even Dickens himself, you know, it's his writing that caused that reform. You know, it's his writing that started up the ragged schools and such like, you know, at his time. So I do think that writers are capable of changing policy, of changing the world. I think the terrifying thing is that a lot of science fiction writers like Atwood and Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, it seems like a lot of people in power are reading their dystopian fiction as kind of a how-to guide, you know. Right.
I know, I agree.
Scary thing, you know. Right. So it's really important that people read science fiction writers, because they are kind of warnings about, if we don't think this through, this next piece of technology, this next advancement, if we don't think it through of where we want it to go, somebody else will, somebody greedy will. So, you know, maybe the wrong people are reading this stuff.
I know it's kind of the dystopian fiction sort of beating over our heads when, you know, and here in America and in high schools especially, I read, I was required to read, you know, Atlas Shrugged and Huxley and Orwell and all that. And I'm looking at it and today's world, I mean, there's the cartoon that circulates that says, you know, we're moving the you know, the nightmarish science fiction dystopian stuff to current affairs, you know.
Yeah, I've seen that.
You know, it seems like all that stuff has been played out. I mean, it's not entirely but it's a map. It shows exactly where we've been taking ourselves, you know, with not ignoring some of the problems that these writers have posed. Yeah,
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I think if more of it is in school and less at university level, that will probably help. You know, a lot of those kinds of stories as well, they really help pupils discern the difference between, you know, what's propaganda and obviously persuasive, and how do I sift through it? You know, I also teach media studies, and I can't. Okay. I mean, I think it's probably the most important subject at the moment. You know, given that everything we do is mediated through a screen, everything is filtered through somebody else's lens now.
Right.
So to be able to navigate that objectively and not just passively accept what you're seeing is, I think it's now in our current age a life skill. It's the kind of literacy that if people don't have it, we see really frightening voting habit patterns emerging through, just fueled by tabloids that are owned by conglomerates and the hegemony, and they haven't got those people's concerns fueling them at all, but they're easily manipulated. So media studies, sci-fi, I think it's all really, really important at young age, early high school.
And then speaking of sort of the political irresponsibility of citizens voting, not being media literate and understanding things, how has Brexit affected where you're at right now? Where how has it affected not just society but culture and economy? I'm just curious. I know you say I'm still European on your Facebook profile thing. I see that, but I'm just curious. How is this this radical shift in dynamics? What do you think? How it is going to be the future of your own country due to this?
Well, it's really hard to even somebody, I would say I am media literate. It's really hard to get a grip on what people really think, because everything I get, even though I try to kind of follow lots of different news outlets, it's still an echo chamber. I guess I was really shocked at the result, because everyone I knew in the real world and everything I was getting back online was kind of making me think that we would never experience Brexit. It was kind of a non-starter. It wasn't even a thing to vote on. Nobody knew what it really was. It was just an idea, a feeling that went to vote, which was incredible. So how is it over here? It's kind of, I'm lucky because my dad's Irish, my father's Irish, so I've got an Irish passport. And my husband's parents are also Irish. He's got an Irish passport, and we're trying to get our kids Irish passports. I just think the opportunities for them will be much better if they're European citizens, like with the Erasmus scheme, if they want to study for free and not have to pay the extortionate university fees that we now have in this country. I mean, I went to university for free back in the 90s. I didn't pay a single thing. I actually got living expenses for a grant, and I could not have gone. I wouldn't have gone on to be a teacher. I wouldn't have been able to have got the qualifications I have or have the experience I have now. And I don't think it's ever right that your children should have less opportunities than you. It should always be a bit better, So we just thought we should be making sure that they can study and live wherever they want to, as we could.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's drastically unfair for children to grow up and not have the same opportunities as their parents, and then especially if their parents may shame them and say, well, I had to face this, and I did this and so forth, and I was able to do that. And that happens a lot in sort of tough love environments. I find that parents are often, when their kids say, well, it's harder for me, it's nowadays I have to student loans and all this heavy all these life issues and these all this stuff I have to pay for, and their parents just say, hey, well, I grew up with this and that, and it's really kind of hard to be young in a way. And I made a post not too long ago about listening to young people and taking them seriously when you're older, and realizing that their world is, even though it's very different than the world we grew up in, there's so many things that are very similar to what we faced when we were in that age, and it's I got a pretty good positive response. So yeah, I was letting our producer's having some power issues, so that's why I've kind of continued a little further. But I think it's been it's being a very interesting conversation. So I just hopefully we can keep it, if he'll be able to get back in here and close the thing out in a little bit. But how would you think, as a reader reading your work, how do you think a reader would describe your writing from sort of looking at it subjectively and objectively at the same time?
How would a reader describe my writing? I think the thing that readers might struggle with is the fact that it's not one genre. It's 4 very different genres in 4 different stories. Mm-hmm. So there's like a surrealist tragedy comedy, kind of a Kafka-esque kind of story, and then there's an old English one, folk tale, kind of a horror folk tale, and then there's this climate fiction, this sci-fi novella. So they're so different in their genres. So some readers might find that incongruous. Some readers might be exactly what they want. It might be the fact that, within one book, quite quickly, it's something new, and, your interest can be piqued again because it's so different. Each story is so different. Although the central theme is the same of attachments and bonds, there's different locations and times that hopefully that would keep it interesting.
So what would your final message be to our viewers today?
Final message. I guess hold your children close. Keep your attachments strong. Just try and remember that, I guess. That's the biggest moral of the tale that I try and get across. Yeah.
Would you like to say any thank yous for people who have supported you, or some shout outs, hellos to friends and family while you're on the program?
Thank you. Yeah, that would be lovely. Well, I dedicated it to my family and my parents. Okay. That's my strongest attachments. And also Cab Publishing, Chrissy and Adam at Cab Publishing are just so wonderful and supportive. Chris Gregory at Alternative Stories and Fake Realities podcast, just so creative and great. The Hairspell trilogy, which The Hairs of Horsenden Hill, one of the stories appears as an audio drama on there, and he's done such a great job. He's just made it beautiful. The actors are great on there as well. And the music's by Inga Thompson, so fantastic music too. My character's even got her own theme tune, so that's really exciting. And Andy Nicholson as well, who really encouraged me at the beginning to continue writing and submitting as well. So yeah, they're the big thank yous.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you. I think been an interesting discussion, just all across the board, everywhere we talked, and I think we
covered a lot, didn't we?
Yeah, it was very fun. I enjoyed the whole discussion, and we have an anthology we're putting together of literary works from our guests. If hopefully you'll have something to share with us for that.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah, it's the Literary Parrot. That'll be coming out in December. December 1st is our deadline. So November 15th is the deadline for submissions. So I'd love to cut your work. If you have a story or a poem you'd like to share with us,
that'd be great. Yes, I'll send you something now. I'll email it along now.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on the program. This has been our 211th episode with Sarra Culleno. And I hope our viewers got a lot out of the discussion, and I'm hoping that you guys are watching out there will subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, just hit that subscribe button. Blink, blank, blink. There you go, as the sci-fi robot would say. So we got the next edition of the Literary Parrot coming out December 1st. Deadline for submissions, if you're in the anthology, is November 15th. And I've been emailing all you guys out there to get involved with us and send us something. So hopefully we'll get a good set of submissions. Like the first book was an excellent success. I would like to thank all those who bought it and made it the success it was. If you would like to donate to the program itself directly, well, we have a PayPal, paypal.me/nyparrot. And we'll accept any sum of money, whether it's $5 or $5,000, $100,000, whatever you've got. We could use it. We want to improve our production and our quality. We are the best and only worldwide TV channel giving voice to creative minds here on this YouTube station, the New York Parrot. And enjoy some of our other programming as well, American Foreign.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV.